Welcome to Backchecking the Bolts. Backchecking the Bolts is your cup of coffee to get you the latest on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Join host Jason Linkus and the managing editor of Raw Charge, Justin Godfrey, as they break down the Lightning's most recent games and go beyond the highlights, telling you what the box scores didn't. It's time to drop the puck.
It's February 24th, 2026, and the Bolts are one day away from getting back to action, and you are listening to Backchecking the Bolts. Hi, everybody. I am your host, Jason Linkus, here in North Huntington, Pennsylvania, and I'm always joined by the managing editor of Raw Charge. He's the one and only Justin Godfrey. Justin, how you doing?
It's another beautiful Tuesday evening here. A little chilly. It was actually hoodie weather down here in Florida, so we all enjoy that. Not too cold, no snow, nothing like that. But hey, we got to wear, a long sleeve shirt for a change.
Sort of feels weird that hockey's back now. We had the Olympic hockey. We all get that, but it's been 2.5 weeks since the Lightning have been back in action.
Yeah, it does seem like it's been forever since, the NHL was underway. Big kind of reset feeling to it right now. We had these teams that were hot going into the stretch, teams that were cold, and can either one of them pick it up? Can some teams, use this as a reset button on their season and just kind of, hey, we were skidding going into the Olympic break, but now there's a chance for us to make our playoff push. And then for a team like the Lightning, can they pick it up where they left it off, where they went, 19, they win 19 games out of 21 or something like that. So,
19-1-1.
19-1-1 points in 20 out of 21. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting first couple games coming out of this break, just because it was such a long break for most of the players.
Well, there's been some injuries that happened over at the Olympics. We will get to that. But first of all, Justin, let's take a look back at the gold medal game. When you and I were on the air, it was 1-0 U.S. after one period. I think pretty much everyone knows what happened. It was a 2-1 United States win in overtime. But let's look a little bit beyond the box scores. Canada dominated the box score with the exception of the final score.
Yeah, I think we both kind of predicted a little bit higher scoring game, but Connor Hellebuyck wasn't having any of that. And he was the number one player of that game. Jack Hughes is going to get credit for the overtime goal. But the U.S. doesn't get there without Hellebuyck's play in net. I mean, he was simply outstanding. He had that, picture-perfect save on Devin Taves. He stopped Connor McDavid on a breakaway. He stopped Macklin Celebrini on a breakaway. The U.S. simply doesn't win that game without Hellebuyck in net. On the other hand, Binnington wasn't tested as much. I thought he still had a really good game. There wasn't much he could do on the overtime winner. I mean, Cal McCarr is at the U.S. blue line. He kind of pokes after a puck. Hughes is able to get it around him, and then it's basically a 3-on-1 break the other way, makes a nice pass, and Hughes buries it. So I don't think you can fault either goaltender in that game, but it did make for really, really fun hockey. It was chance after chance, it seemed at times, going up and back. The U.S. did their job. I know Billy Guerin took some flack for the type of roster he put together, but in the end, their penalty kettle went 19 for 19, and Vincent Trocheck, who some folks didn't think should be on the roster, was a big part of that penalty kill.
Well, speaking of the penalty kill, they killed a huge 5-on-3 for about a minute and a half. Jake Gensel was the first party that went off, and that was the big turning point in the game. Even though Canada would go on to tie it, it really looked like at that point Canada was about to really put their foot on the gas and just take over the game.
Yeah, definitely. Gensel didn't have the greatest tournament. I don't think he was involved. He just didn't get on the score sheet. So it's kind of unfortunate that he took that first end of the back-to-back penalties there. And then Canada really built momentum off of that, even though they didn't score. It's 1-0 at the time. They did generate some chances on that, and throughout the rest of the period before Makar eventually tied the game up. But yeah, it kind of was a one-sided game for much of it, but maybe that's what the U.S. wanted. They were playing a little rope-a-dope where, hey, we know Canada has more offense than we do. We're going to play into that, and we're just going to take our chances. It's a risky way to play, especially in a gold medal game, but in the end, it paid off, and that's all that anybody's really going to remember.
I also thought this was a little bit of retribution for the Four Nations tournament. In the Four Nations, in the deciding game, the United States outplayed Canada. And instead of Hellebuyck, it was Binnington for Canada who stood on his head and won the game for Canada. This was sort of the polar opposite.
Yeah, the same. And I think one of the big differences for the U.S. is you had Quinn Hughes on the blue line for the Olympics as opposed to where he was out for the Four Nations. He kind of matches that Makar style of play where you can generate offense from the black line. He had a huge goal in overtime. He set up a couple goals throughout the series. I think he finished it with 8 points or something, like a goal and 7 assists, something along those lines. So he was a real dynamic force at the end. And then, it's his brother that finishes things off. So it was a happy night in the Hughes household because their mother picked up a gold medal for her involvement with the women's team as well. So, yeah, all around great tournament for the Hughes family.
Well, the coach of Team Canada was Tampa's coach, John Cooper, and he took a little bit of flack for what he said after the game. And I want to read you the quote, Justin, and I want to get your thoughts. Cooper said, "You take 4 players off of the ice. Now hockey's not hockey anymore. There's a reason overtime and shootouts are in play. It's all TV driven to end games, so it's not a long time. There's a reason why 3-on-3 is not in the Stanley Cup Finals or playoffs." Now, I'm going to read one more part of that quote that happened later in the interview. All the teams know the rules going into this beforehand. So you can't just come here and say we're the losing team because we lost 3-on-3 and that's not fair. We knew the rules coming in. We won a game in this tournament 3-on-3. So that's not the way it is. Let's break down the first part of the quote. You take 4 players off the ice. It's not hockey anymore. This is a game deciding the gold medal. And the NHL only uses 3-on-3 for overtime, and they want to create scoring chances. Is 3-on-3 the right way to go in the Olympics, especially in deciding a medal?
We kind of briefly discussed this before we started recording tonight. There's a reason there's 3-on-3 in the Olympics, and it makes sense for, I would say, the preliminary rounds and all the way up to maybe the semifinals. But once you start getting into these gold medal deciding games or medal deciding games, I think you kind of have to have it a little bit more true to the spirit of the game. I honestly agree 100% with Cooper when it comes to the gold medal game. I don't think 3-on-3 should decide it. And it's not just because Canada lost or anything like that. It does really change the nature of the game. But he did point out, it's funny, everyone listened to, read, quoted that first part of his quote that you read. But right after it, and what struck me out watching the actual press conference when he read it, that was almost a prepared statement by Cooper. He was going to get that out no matter what. You can just tell by the way he answered the question. I think it was the second question somebody asked him. And that first part that you read out, he blasted right through it. But as the quote went on, he actually finished it up with another part that you didn't read. I don't think a lot of media outlets picked it up. So right after he finished that part about it's not hockey, you take 4 players off the ice. Towards the end of that quote, he also said, but there's still skilled players out there making skilled plays. And the U.S. team has some skilled players, as do we. And they made one more play in overtime than we did. And you have to tip your hat to them. So he does kind of walk it back a little bit. And I agree with him. Like I said at the beginning of the statement, I do agree with him. I don't think the gold medal should be decided 3-on-3. I don't think it should be decided in a shootout. That being said, for the rest of the tournament, I mean, you figure there's something like 30 games or something that the organizers have to schedule. It's not like this is the only sport going on over at the Olympics. So there is a time crunch to it. So when you have Slovakia playing Italy or something like that, there's no need for this thing to go 4 overtimes. So I think 3-on-3 works in those preliminary rounds. For finals, semifinals, I'd be good with that. But I think for the 2 medal games, you at least got to start overtime at 5-on-5. Maybe you do a 10-minute 5-on-5 overtime session and knock it down to 4 players aside. That could be a solution as well. So from the sound of it, doesn't sound like the Olympic Committee or the IIHF is interested in changing. I think they've already released a statement saying that they're going to, the next tournament, it's still going to be 3-on-3 deciding in overtime. Cooper got, he said what he had to say. And yeah, so got his little press out of it, which is always fun for everybody. Something to talk about after the tournament before hockey starts back up. But yeah, I agree with him. I still think gold medal game, you got to have a little bit more than 6 players on the ice.
The one thing that I would say is in a normal hockey game, you never see 3-on-3. You'll see 4-on-4, coincidental minor penalties. You see that regularly, but you never see 3-on-3. And that's why if you're going to make a change where you're going to take skaters off the ice, at least make it 4-on-4. To me, that's regular hockey. When it's 3-on-3, as soon as there's an odd man rush, if there's a save or a shot goes wide, it's an odd man rush the other way, and it's just a never-ending series of odd man rushes. That's what I don't like about the game. But I like it better 4-on-4. I always like the older overtime. I think they changed it in 99 when they went to 4-on-4. I always liked it. It wasn't just a series of odd man rushes. It was still plays. The one thing that I can't stand on 3-on-3, you'll see one team possess the puck. They skate around the offensive zone for 45 seconds just to tire the other team out. They make a change because it's the long change because they switch sides. And then it becomes our fresh players against your tired players.
One thing I'll say is probably that there isn't really a perfect solution to this problem right now, because there is definitely a time constraint that you have to look for in regards to getting these games done, especially in the preliminary rounds. Gold medal game, bronze medal game, I'm cool with rolling 5-on-5 overtime for at least 10 minutes. Then maybe, like you said, take it down to 4-on-4 or something like that. But you also have to understand that you have a lot of casual fans tuning into this, and for nothing else, this 3-on-3 was pretty exciting for the tournament games that a lot of people watch. So you're looking at 3 of the last 4 games basically went to overtime. None of them lasted very long. They were exciting. They had great goals being scored. So I think there's a delicate line that you're trying to balance here, because not only are the Olympic organizers looking to control the time constraints, if you're an NHL owner, you don't want your players out there playing 6, 7 period overtimes for something that you're not making any money on. So I'm sure there was some sort of compromise as to coming up to this solution as to how they're going to end these games, keep these players from playing way too much and possibly injuring themselves for a game that, again, the NHL owners aren't making any money on. It's not the perfect solution. I enjoyed it for much of it, as kind of a casual fan with rooting interests in regards to Lightning on both ends. I just thought it was a really well played game. The solution is what it is right now, and it sounds like the IIHF and the Olympic Committee isn't interested in changing it. So I think they've already released a statement basically saying that it's great for Cooper to make those comments, but they're going to keep moving forward the way they are.
Now, Justin, you mentioned the owners were a little bit apprehensive about sending their players over to the Olympics. There were some injuries, and there were some possible serious ones. Give us a quick recap of the injuries.
So from what I can recall, and again, this brain isn't as strong as it used to be, but still, the big one is probably Kevin Fiala. He fractured his leg on a hit from Tom Wilson. So he's out for the rest of the season for the LA Kings, who had just made the big all-in, traded for Artemi Panarin right before the break. But you also had, Hedman was dinged up a little bit. It sounds like he's going to be okay. We'll get to that in a little bit. Sidney Crosby is probably the most notable one. He wasn't able to go in the gold medal game. Pittsburgh's kind of concerned about what his status is. I've heard rumors of it's not season ending, but could be a couple weeks till he's back on the ice. And then just today we found out that Mikko Rantanen's probably going to be out for a couple weeks with an undisclosed injury that he suffered in Finland's games out over there. There was always going to be injuries. I mean, this was always going to be a talking point. Anytime anybody does anything, somebody's going to get hurt doing it. So you kind of have to deal with it. It sucks for all these teams. I'm not going to lie. It really changes probably what Dallas or Pittsburgh wanted to do at the deadline if their players aren't ready to go. Same to go with LA. But I think overall it's still a benefit. I think it was still positive. I think everybody enjoyed this tournament, and I don't see the NHL backing out anytime soon.
Now, Tampa wasn't alone in having injuries during the Olympics. Victor Hedman missed Sweden's last game, the quarterfinal matchup against the United States, but it looks like he's back. Justin, the Lightning have had a ton of injuries. The last couple weeks before we came to the break, guys like Braden Point were out for a significant amount of time. I think he missed 11 games. Where are we right now on the Bolts injury front?
For the most part, it's actually some positive news coming out of it. Outside of Max Crozier's injury that we talked about in a previous episode, where he's going to miss, 10 weeks. Nick Paul is still a little banged up. His return isn't really something that they've discussed. I know during the middle of the tournament, Rob Zedler had mentioned he's going to, quote unquote, need a little while after the play resumed. So those two are out. It looks like Braden Point could be in the lineup tomorrow. That's what they're shooting for. Victor Hedman sounds like he's going to be in, but also the big news is that it also sounds like Emil Lilleberg and Charles-Edouard Destu are going to be good to go. So the defense is getting healthy pretty quickly, which helps, especially if Hedman isn't 100% yet. I wouldn't be surprised to see them roll an 11-7 kind of lineup going tomorrow. If they get Point back, that really helps their center line because Sorelli is still practicing in a non-contact. He's got the red jersey on for the last couple of days, and it sounds like what they are worried about is actually contact. So it's a good thing he's wearing that. He's got a busted up shoulder from what it sounded like. So they haven't really tested it in any like battle drills along the boards or anything. I think they were planning on doing that maybe tomorrow morning to see how he goes. But I wouldn't be surprised to see him maybe miss the next two games coming out of the stretch since they are on a back-to-back. But if they can get Point back, that's going to be a huge boost for that roster, that offense, which hasn't exactly been firing on all cylinders at 5-on-5 lately.
When the Bolts get fully healthy, who is the guy that has to go back to Syracuse? You have to factor in who can clear waivers, who has waiver priority to go back. Who is that person you think that's going to be sent back first?
Well, I think if you're looking at the forwards, it's probably going to be Sabrin. He is a veteran, but not really experienced up there. He was brought up to provide some of that physical play. So I think he goes down first among the forwards. Then if you're looking at the defenseman, that's going to be a big question. Right now, if you want a silver lining out of the Crozier injury, it kind of puts off that decision a little bit for the Lightning. With him being out, you can bring back Destu and Lilleberg and still be okay roster-wise. But say everybody's healthy, I think you're looking at Declan Carlisle probably being put on waivers. I think he just passed over the waiver eligible period. So I think those are your first two that are kind of could go on waivers. You'd be looking at Carlisle and Sabrin. Of course, Jack Finley was claimed on waivers at the beginning of this, so that did free up one of the roster spots.
The NHL trade deadline is going to be happening on March the 6th. With the Olympic break, the rosters were frozen, but they were unfrozen 2 days ago. The first big trade in the NHL happened. Brent Kulak was traded from the Pittsburgh Penguins to the Colorado Avalanche for Sam Girard and a second-round pick. Justin, is this the beginning of setting the market for what defensemen are going to be going for?
It could be. I think this trade kind of has a couple non-usual factors in regards to it. One thing is, to me, with the way the deal was structured, so you had Brett Kulak going to Colorado. In return, the Avalanche are sending Pittsburgh Sam Girard and a second-round pick, but both sides are eating all the salaries on the contract. So there's no retained salary on either part of the deal, which frees up some cap space for Colorado. So I feel like this is kind of a slightly bigger trade in the big picture, if you will. They may have some other moves in line, and they want to free up a little bit of cap space, which moving Girard does. I mean, he's a very serviceable defenseman. He's got great underlying numbers. He's not that old. Dubas does a great job of getting assets for Brett Kulak, who was going to be an unrestricted free agent this summer. He came over in that Tristan Jarry deal. So he was always probably going to be a trade piece for the Penguins. And I think Dubas did a really good job. So I think overall, this may not have that big of an effect on some of the other veteran defensemen that may be out there. I don't think everybody's going to grab a young salary controlled player and a high draft pick. I think you're going to still see a lot of these veteran guys on minimum deals go for mid-round picks or later future considerations, things like that. So I don't think it's going to upset the apple cart too much, but it is interesting that that's the first deal out of the gate, unless, of course, you're a Matt Ruff fan who was involved in a minor deal for, was it Julien Gauthier or something like that? So, yeah.
Basically an AHL player for an AHL player.
Yeah, that's what officially kicked off the trade market. But, yeah, it was that Kulak for Girard. I don't think anybody had that on their radar as far as Sam Girard being on the market. So, again, really good move by Dubas to pick him up. And he's done a really great job, I think, over the last couple of years, just stockpiling some assets for Pittsburgh. It really reminds me of what Yzerman did before the Lightning went on their run, where they used a lot of their veteran players to pick up things that other players, other teams will want when you need to bring in that big names. We talked about some of those trades that Yzerman and Brisebois have made where they've dealt a lot of draft picks. Well, you can only do that if you've acquired a lot of draft picks. And I think it feels like that's something Kyle Dubas is setting up in Pittsburgh for maybe, a big run down the stretch, maybe next year or the year after that, as he tries to hold on to the glory years of Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin as their hair turns gray and their skating slows down a little bit.
Well, Sidney's 38, so he's going to be 40 pretty soon, but he's still a hell of a player, and he's one of those guys that's held up. He's one of few. Most guys, once they hit 35, you see a big decline in their play. He's consistently a 90-point scorer every year. So there's something to be said for how he's been able to maintain his play. But Justin, we're looking forward. We got 2 games coming up for the Lightning. But first, I want to take a look at the standings. In the Atlantic, Tampa in first place, 78 points. They have 2 games in hand on Montreal, who's in second with 72. The Red Wings are also tied with the Canadiens at 72 points. They are 3 games ahead of Tampa. So Tampa is leading the division and has played the fewest games. Over in the Metro, you got Carolina with 78 points. Tampa's going to see them in Carolina on Thursday. The Penguins, as you just mentioned, with 70 points, 56 games. The New York Islanders sit in third with 69 points. In the wild card spots, you got the Buffalo Sabres with 70 points, the Bruins with 69, and the hard-charging Columbus Blue Jackets, who were red hot, 9-1 in their last 10. They have 65 points, along with the Washington Capitals. But Justin, the Bolts come right back to action, play tomorrow night in Tampa, a 7:30 start against the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Maple Leafs sit in the East well out of the playoffs with 63 points. Hear that Austin Matthews is questionable for this game. John Tavares has the flu for Toronto. This might be catching Toronto at the right time.
It could be. I would probably upgrade to Matthews to probable but extremely tired. He's had quite the travel schedule over the last couple of days.
Is that an official NHL injury diagnosis?
Exactly. Yes. But you figure, they play basically a night game in Italy, party into the wee hours of the morning, jump on an airplane. It appears they partied into the wee hours in Miami the other day. And I believe Matthews is flying up to D.C. Tonight. I think he's in D.C. for the State of the Union. He was part of the group that did go up. And then he's got to fly back down to Tampa. So, that's a lot of travel for someone who's played a lot of games and a lot of minutes over the last 2 weeks. So he's going to be there. I'm assuming he's going to play. It sounds by all reports he's probably going to play. But yeah, you don't know what kind of shape he's going to be in. And then Tavares battling a little bit of the flu. That's, your top 2 centers right there aren't going to be 100%. So for a team that needs every point that they can get coming out of the break, it could be a rough start for Toronto.
When you break down the stats, both of these teams are extremely good on the penalty kill. But on the power play, the Bolts have a significant advantage. They're 12th in the NHL on the power play. Toronto, with all of their firepower up front, is 22nd in the league. And for a team that doesn't defend real well, you better score on the power play if you're not good on defense.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird that a team like that may struggle on the power play. Kind of same thing's happening in Colorado. If you look at their power play, I think they're one of the last teams in the league. So sometimes maybe you can have too much talent. There is only one puck after all that can be shot on the net at a time. So it's just one of those weird things where you would think a team like Toronto is better on the power play than they are. I don't know what's going on with them this year. They are coming in on a 3-game win streak, so they did start to put it together a little bit. Goaltending's always a question for me with them. You got Joseph Wall going now. I think he's going to be your starter. So can he put it together? Can he stay healthy? I think has always been his big problem. He's always put up good numbers against the Lightning, but the fact is he tends to get hurt quite a bit. So if he can stay healthy, maybe they make a run. Maybe they pull off a big deal at the deadline and get back into this. But it's kind of been an interesting year for them.
Interesting that you mentioned about the Avalanche with all their talent. They are dead last in the league, 15.1% on the power play. That's really hard to imagine with as much talent as not only up front, but they have a ton of talent on the blue line. You have Cale Makar back there. It's hard to envision that power play struggling that much. But Justin, the Bolts, they have Toronto, but then they got to go right on the road. They got to go up to Carolina, a 7:00 start the very next night. They're probably going to be facing Carolina's number 1 goalie, Brandon Bussi, just signed a 3-year deal. This is a tough spot for the Bolts. You just come back, you have a bunch of players coming, and then you got to play back-to-back, and Carolina does not play Wednesday night. They're waiting for you.
Yeah, and they're another team that, a lot like the Lightning, I mean, they were red hot going into the break. If I'm not mistaken, they're 8-0-2 in their last 10 games. And it's always going to be a tough match against Carolina, just with the style that they play. They're going to be constantly attacking your zone. They're going to be constantly firing shots at you. and it's just a tough matchup. And as you pointed out, they're going to be pretty well rested as far as the Lightning can play it 24 hours before, have to make that road trip. Meanwhile, Carolina's sitting at home getting another practice in and resting up. It's going to be a tough back to back. It's really early to start talking about schedule losses in the second part of this season, but that's kind of when you circle on the calendar and be like, hey, if you can drag a point out of this, you have to consider it a victory.
With Carolina's spot in the Metro, they're in first place. They're tied with the Lightning in points, even though the Lightning have 2 games in hand. You think you see Vasilevsky play both games because you want to try to get ahead of Carolina and get home ice through the East? Is it too early to say give Johansson a start, or are we looking at Vasilevsky both games?
If there was ever a spot where you'd see him, I wouldn't be surprised if Vasilevsky is both. But then again, they got Buffalo on Saturday, so it's not like you get much of a break. Johansson's going to have to play at least one of these 3 games, I would think. The 3 games in 4 nights. But it's a possibility that he goes back to back. Cooper has very, very rarely done that. And I think he trusts his team. He trusts Johansson to the point where, hey, maybe we win 6-4 like we did last time. So it could be one of those things where he's going to rely more on his offense than he is goaltending, and just tell Johansson to make that one extra stop he needs to make to give him the win. I could see, yeah, I wouldn't hesitate to bet the over against Carolina.
I do want to ask you this question. You followed the team for quite some time. You'd mentioned that Cooper has faith in Johansson. Has there been a time in the last 5-6 years when the Lightning have been as good as they've been where he just doesn't have trust in that backup goaltender, where he will play his starter a little bit more, or will he always play the backup pretty much no matter what?
I think pretty much under the Vasilevsky era, he's been willing to give the guy. Let's not act like Vasi's only making 40 starts a year. I mean, the guy's going to make 60 to 65 starts, so he's still going to get the ball to playing time. At the same point, Cooper's not going to overuse him. I think that's a lesson he learned early in his career. If you remember under the Ben Bishop era, I think that first year that Bishop was a starter, they basically ran him into the ground, and he wasn't 100% healthy in the playoffs. Again, if memory serves right, they got swept by Montreal, and it just felt like that maybe he overused Bishop a little bit. So since then, once they had the Bishop Vasilevsky tandem, of course, it was a little easier to do. But I think under the Vasi era, he's been really good at having a veteran backup in there. There's been a few cases where injuries have come along where maybe he started Vasi more than he's wanted to. And then vice versa. When Vasilevsky was out, he probably played, his backups a little bit too much, or not too much, but more than he wanted to. So, but for the most part, they map this out when the season starts. They're all on the same page. Cooper's mentioned along many times that if Vasilevsky had his way, Vasi would start every single game. He'd play 82 games, but kind of reeling him in from time to time is more of a challenge than resting him. So.
That's the tough part of being the coach. You have to look down the road in order to make those correct decisions. Justin, what's going on at Raw Charge as you get ready for the Bolts coming back to action?
We're just getting back into the daily previews, recaps of every single game out there. We're working on some of the prospects. We're going over that top 25 list that the readers compiled over the summer. We're kind of catching up everybody on how the prospects have been doing. Now that a lot of the seasons are starting to come towards the end for junior hockey and for college, it's not going to be that far along before we start talking Frozen Four stuff for those college players out there. So, yeah. Got that going on. We'll slip in some other articles from here and there. Thinking about some trade stuff, maybe some trade pieces that the Lightning have that others may not think are on their radar. Brisebois going to have to move some salary at some point, so there could be some surprising players heading out. And we'll take a look at that as we draw a little closer to that wonderful March 6th deadline.
We talked about college hockey. For those of you on YouTube, I'm going to show you right now. I'm rocking my Vermont Catamounts jersey, and if you hear our opening or closing, that is done by Vermont Catamounts PA announcer Michael Cairns up there in Burlington. We appreciate him jumping on board and helping us out. But I got to say, this is a pretty cool sweater. He gave me this when they were still in the Hockey East. I love repping this one.
Yep, and yeah, it's it's got its ties to the Lightning history as well. So a very famous player wore that jersey, well, a version of that jersey during his college days, if you may remember.
Yeah, Martin St. Louis, but also Victor Stahlberg.
I was thinking of Eric Perrin, but sure, Marty St. Louis works as well. So
Yeah, Eric Perrin, Victor Stahlberg, and didn't Russ Colton?
was he a Vermont Catamount? That's a
I
great
think he
question.
was.
Yeah. So God, you can see how quick my Google skills are right now, as I can't even delay long enough. But yeah, we'll say
Hey, I'm the
yes.
one who just turned 50.
Let's see. Ba-da-ba-ba. Ross Colton, where did he go to school? I thought he was UConn for some reason. Nope, you're correct, sir. He was a Vermont Catamount. How about that? Look at that memories.
Yes.
Yes. He finished his tenure at Vermont with 28 goals and 50 points in 69 total games. So, yeah. So, yeah, a long lineage of Lightning greats have come through the Catamount system, if you will.
Special thank you to Michael Cairns for hooking me up with this jersey. Ladies and gentlemen, that is all for today. We will be back most likely on Friday to recap the games against Toronto and Carolina. For the managing editor of Raw Charge, he's Justin Godfrey. You can visit him at www.rawcharge.com and on Blue Sky. I'm Jason Linkus. Thank you for listening, and go Bolts.
Go Bolts.
Thank you for listening to Backchecking the Bolts. We are free and available on all platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon, YouTube, and Deezer. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to subscribe and leave a review. You can follow Justin on Blue Sky at rawcharge.com. You can follow the show on X at Tampa_Bolts_pod and on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Backchecking the Bolts. If you're interested in advertising on the show or partnering with us, you can find more information in the show notes or email Jason at backcheckingthebolts@yahoo.com.